What is up, my friends? Welcome to another episode of the Whole Health with Rob Carney podcast. And on this episode, I'm joined by my friend Madalyn Tavares. And Madalyn is an integrative health practitioner and spiritual life coach. So, coming out on October 23rd will be the podcast that we did together on her podcast. So, you can check that out on the Clean Bee podcast. We had a really great conversation. I'm really excited for round two here. I'm not going to talk too much because Madalyn do a much better job of describing yourself. But Madalyn, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm so excited to connect with you again. And yeah, like you just mentioned, I'm excited to share the episode that you did with my listeners. And I'm excited to continue that conversation with you today.
Absolutely. Well, a big thing that we want to talk about today, and I know you're a huge advocate of, is living a low toxicity lifestyle, or you said a low tox living, hashtag low tox living. So what does that mean to you, first of all? And what are some little things that you look for when you're looking at around someone's house, for instance, in terms of helping them reduce some toxins?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I love say hashtag low tox living. So, you know, for me personally, where this journey sort of initially started was, um, similar to how when you shared in your story of experiencing a health challenge that sparked you to go on your own journey and discover a better way to take care of yourself. It was somewhat of a similar story for me. I had moved to the Virgin Islands, which is in the Caribbean, from Florida when I was 22. And I was there for about, I want to say 3 months, maybe 6 months or so. And before I noticed that I got this little bump on my shin. And this little bump was so itchy. And I thought it was just mosquito bite. Long story short, it got a lot bigger. And then very quickly, I thought, oh, it's a spider bite. And I started, freaking out, thinking that I'm going to need to have my leg cut off or something. I go to the ER, having no idea what to expect. And then the guy's like, oh, it's just a staph infection. That's fine. Like, here's some antibiotics. If it doesn't clear it up, we're going to need to cut it open. So I had heard at that point of staph infections, but I thought that that pertained only to people in the hospital when they're really ill, something called MRSA. And that was kind of the extent of my knowledge. To make a long story very short, a few more staph infections popped up. And every time the doctors were just trying to feed me more antibiotics. And I just knew that something needed to change. And I just had this thought to myself, like, clearly my body is working to fight something off and it's having a hard time. And I'm very grateful that my mother from a very early age had kind of already instilled in her children to not use over antibiotics. So I already had that sort of foundation. So instead of taking what would have then been a third course of antibiotics in 2 short months, I decided to just go down the rabbit hole and discover, how can I heal this naturally and how can I support my body? And one of the first things that I discovered, other than a few holistic, more herbal remedy treatments like oil of oregano, manuka honey, and ginger and garlic and things of that nature, was that everything in my kitchen and in my personal care cabinet was, despite my best intentions, was just full of junk. It wasn't serving me. It wasn't helping me heal. And if anything, it was just contributing to the problem and the overwhelm. So that is where I began my initial journey of really cleaning out the closet, cleaning out the cabinets. I definitely went a little bit overboard. I think in the beginning, I'm a all or nothing kind of gal. So don't really recommend that when I speak to people on reducing the chemicals in their home. I think a more measured and slow approach is a more sustainable way. But I just kind of cleaned out, started from a more holistic approach, and then it's been a journey that was 9 years ago now, nearly. So it's been a journey from there. So I guess to answer your question of, what do I really look for? It's just starting simple. It doesn't need to be something so difficult and overwhelming. And I think when people hear low tox living, or they hear, oh, all of these chemicals are bad, they think that they have to just throw everything away. Right. But I just like to encourage people one thing at a time. And yes, that's my little story.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's very common that people get down this path of holistic health or just personal development in general when we find that we have the pain teacher knocking at our door. And that's something very clear to me. It's a common thread between a lot of people who are on the similar path, that there's something that we said enough's enough. There's something that we said we got to make a change. And that's a beautiful part of life, is that we have these opportunities to choose how we respond to a certain adverse event in our life. And so obviously you being faced with the choice of taking antibiotics for the third time in 2 months, or saying, hey, maybe there's a better way, it really also just goes to show the impact that our parents and other influential people can have in our lives. Because maybe if your mother had never said, hey, be careful of antibiotics, you could have been going down this path of taking antibiotics 10 times in the next 10 months. And, God knows what effect that would have. Definitely not good. I think we can both agree on that. But I
Yeah.
think at the end of the day, it's important to note that, like you said, I say this all the time. Keep it simple, start where you're at, use what you have. You don't have to completely change everything in your life, because then things become stressful. And
Hmm.
especially if you're looking to upgrade the quality of things in your house, that's also going to cost some money. And, if you have a lot of money, cool, not really an issue. But if for a lot of people, if finances are a factor as well, you can't realistically just throw out every single object in your house and start anew. And that's where I love the gradual approach. So start, with certain things like I look for is, soaps. Like, don't get those antibacterial soaps, because we are more bacteria than we are actually human cells. So if you're killing all the bacteria in your hands, first of all, you're killing all the bacteria in your hands, which is not good most of the time. But then you're probably touching your face, then you're touching your mouth, and then you're spreading these antibiotics, which are already overdosed with, especially if you eat non-organic foods, everywhere. So I think it's important to just start with the simple things. And for me, I think soap is a great place to start, because a lot of people wash their hands multiple times a day. And, I just kind of want to go into some of the other common chemicals that you find in a home, and, maybe that's specific items, maybe that's specific chemicals to look in. But maybe why don't we start one step at a time and start with the specific items that, whether it's deodorant, soaps, all those type of things.
Yeah. Well, thank you for succinctly saying everything that I was, fiercely nodding my head. I agree with everything that you just said, because especially when it comes to soaps. And so I think that's a perfect place to start. Not only the soap that you use on your hands, let's say, in your bathroom, but also a lot of people use, your common dish soap that you're washing your dishes with. And something from very early on in my life, I felt very uncomfortable about the residue that these soaps would leave behind on
Mm,
particularly in my water bottles. And
mm,
again, I don't know where this sort of phobia came from, but I was always trying to make sure I was rinsing it out all the way and wiping it out, because I was always just concerned. It didn't seem like a good idea intuitively to just drink this residue that's being left behind. So not only are you potentially spreading these antibacterial things like triclosan, right? So that's one of the main chemicals that would be in an antibacterial soap. So that could be now in your glass of water, or that's on your hands. And like you said, we're more bacteria than we are human cells. So the ability to just decimate all of that living within inside of us is just, yeah, we don't want to be doing that. But I guess, to answer your question, as far as, what I look for is, and in some of the top offenders, I guess you could say, particularly in the kitchen, I would say your cleaning products, like you mentioned, as well as cookware. Cookware is a big one that I think a lot of people don't even realize is a huge toxic burden on their body, especially if you have older cookware. So it was in around 2015. I need to double check the actual year, but it wasn't that long ago where they did finally ban Teflon, which is, the common name for a class of these PFOA, these different types of chemicals that make surfaces non-stick, right? So they took this out of the market, but there was never an announcement. There's never this, hey guys, so this is actually a really harmful chemical, and we are going to take it out, to let people know to get rid of their Teflon pans. But the average person doesn't actually know this. And most people have cookware for many years. I mean, my parents have some pots and pans from their wedding in 1980s, So if you have some old pans lying around, you absolutely have potential exposure to Teflon. And the problem with chemicals like Teflon is that they become eroded and easily scratched, right? So if you're using metal utensils in your cookware and you're, washing them and exposing them to high heat, it essentially allows these coated surfaces to crack. And then that's how they leach into your food. So I think really cookware it is an investment to purchase a lot of new cookware. But I think that if you can just start with one pot or pan at a time, pick the one that you use the most. Let's say it's a saucepan or a frying pan, and just pick one that you use the most, and you can opt for a cleaner, safer option.
What are those cleaner, safer options?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the best would be ceramic. Think of if you can, a lot of people might think of the brand like La Creuset, which is very expensive. That's on my dream list of to have a whole kitchen with their items, but you can actually get ceramic coated. So that's what's going to be the most economically feasible for a lot of people, myself included. And what essentially is a ceramic coating that's put on top, but the underlay is still a different conglomerate of metal alloys and things of that nature. But you get that ceramic coating. So again, similar with any other type of pot or pan, metal utensils can scratch it. So it is important to just have proper care. But you can get a ceramic coated pan in your regular grocery store and probably spend 25, 30 bucks. So it's relatively inexpensive, and it's going to not have the PFOAs and these different classes of chemicals on them. And as long as you're taking good care of it and you're not using metal utensils, it's a safe bet. And I would say the other one would be cast iron. Cast iron is a great option. There is an odd chance, or the off chance rather, that some people are very high in iron in their body naturally, in which case, in those circumstances, it might not be the best option. But for most people, their iron levels are normal or fine, or maybe even low. For many women in particular, actually have low iron. So cooking in a cast iron skillet can be another option as well, and they're very sturdy.
What do you think about stainless steel?
Yes, stainless steel as well. I knew I was forgetting one. Stainless steel is a great one. The problem, I guess, the problem is just that it can be not as pleasurable to cook with, because things do tend to get stuck on stainless steel. So for someone who is maybe used to always cooking with a Teflon pan or some other, because even though they removed Teflon from the market, there's this called Teflon 2.0, they call it. It's just a different class of chemicals, essentially doing the same thing, that inevitably will one day be shown to probably be just as bad as Teflon, if not worse, right? As we've seen over the years with different chemicals of all types. So if someone is always using or very comfortable with a Teflon pan, to get them over to a stainless steel sometimes can be a little bit of a hassle. It'll just be a different cooking experience. So that's why the ceramic coated ones can kind of give you that similar Teflon feel without the negative side effects. But stainless steel, other than that, is a fantastic option.
Yeah, I think one benefit too is when we use the stainless steel is just use a little bit more butter. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of adding more healthy fats to our diet, more coconut oil, more butter, more ghee, avocado
Yes.
oil, whatever else. So I think a lot of people still are in the mindset of this whole, low fat, high carb diet, which is great for some people, but for most people, it's not, if we're being honest. So I think it's also great for me. I just add a little bit more butter on my pan, add a little bit more, avocado oil, coconut oil. And, I think that that's an important thing to recognize that, hey, the difference is, yeah, you might not need the non-stick because now you just have some more, healthy fats in there. So I think that there's always a solution to a lot of these challenges that we come up with because yeah, we can get so accustomed to having a non-stick pan that you spray a little Pam, which that's a whole nother thing of
Ooh.
canola oil and other garbage that's in there, whatever the aerosol stuff to have it spray out is. So whole nother topic we can go into. But I think it's important to recognize, like you said, there's a lot of these things like cookware that you're consuming that you're physically putting that into your body and consuming. And in recognizing the fact we can start small. And I think like hand soap and I think cookware is a great place to start. I generally use stainless steel. I just think it's easier. It is affordable. Cast iron is great. That can be a pain in the butt to clean sometimes if you don't clean them effectively in the right time frame. So being mindful of those type of things. But just kind of going back to the hand soap, it always amazes me. I remember back in the beginning of COVID when people are saying, oh, there's this new virus, make sure you use your antibacterial soap. And first thought is like, how does that even make sense? If we're saying that we're going against a virus, why are we targeting bacteria when the bacteria are probably the darn thing that are actually keeping us healthy? It's like our
Yes.
bacteria are actually our immune system. And now we're saying, oh, yeah, we're fighting a virus, but let's kill the bacteria. And why? Well, there's never a good answer on that. So it just always blows my mind of the pushing of the antibacterial soap, especially like in a hospital, which I get it to some degree because, in case there's something bad out there, you want to kill that. But just like hand sanitizer, if you're going to use hand sanitizer, you better have touched something absolutely terrible for you that is most likely going to cause some sort of disease or infection. Because if you're not, you're just killing your immune system right on your hands. So I could definitely ramble on that for 20 more minutes, but just wanted to throw that out there just to be aware of the fact that if we're talking about health and we're talking about fighting viruses, using an antibiotic is not going to help kill a virus because it is intended to kill bacteria. Antibacterial is against that. So just want to put that out there as we look at a lot of these things. And if anybody is worried about viruses, don't get antibacterial soap. You're actually doing yourself a very big disservice, hurting your immune system. So I always like to look at, me personally, I believe more in the terrain theory as opposed to the germ theory. So if we can focus on improving our vessel, improving us, improving our immune system, improving our health, getting more vitamin C, getting out in the sun, getting vitamin D, doing all these things to improve ourselves, our immune system would be much more robust. And we don't have to focus on killing all the potential bad guys, which 90% of the time, any contact of bacteria is actually going to be beneficial for us.
Oh, amen. I'm giving you the double clap emojis here. You heard it here first, folks. Honestly, I could not have said it any better. I completely agree. And also, I'm so happy that you brought up terrain theory. I'm a supporter, and I think that terrain theory versus germ theory just makes so much more sense. And to really further touch on your point to just the bacteria versus the virus, it's exactly. And not only why would we try to kill bacteria when in fact what we were technically fighting is a virus, but further to that is that these chemicals are known endocrine disruptors. Which for folks listening at home, that maybe I'm sure your audience is very well aware of the endocrine system, but that's your hormones, right? So our hormones are governing and controlling massive aspects and components of our body. And we're already inundated with endocrine disruptors in so many other areas as well. So then to add on this extra layer of over sanitizing everything, that is just absolutely crushing our hormones. And it's like you said, hurting our immune system. And I always say to people, you know, give me all the hugs, go play in the dirt, roll around with the animals, get your hands dirty. Don't over sanitize. I mean, that is actually what's going to support your immune system.
Definitely. And on that note too, is I used to work with a holistic nutritionist, and she used to say if I could legally tell people to go eat dirt, I would go tell them to go eat dirt. And so, obviously it all depends on the quality of the soil. And dirt and soil are two very different things. Dirt I look at as dead soil, and soil being very much
Yeah.
alive. So when I always am gardening, if there's a little bit of dirt on there, I'm not washing off, cleaning it off with tap water. Most times is what we'd be washing off with anyway, which again, a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. But if I found a little of my organic soil on my spinach or on my green bean or whatever it's on, I'm going to eat it. That's a benefit to my immune system. That's a benefit to me. Cool, nice, free probiotics. I'll take it. So if we can utilize nature and really work with nature, nature often doesn't really make too many mistakes. Typically, it's us humans that try to alter everything and isolate everything. And so I'm kind of on the side of nature knows a little bit better than my little feeble mind might do.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. And, I think, we, it's always in good faith. We've done a lot of good things, and I know you feel this way. We had a little bit of this conversation on the episode on my podcast of, there's a time and a place for every type of medicine and modality. There's a time and a place for the allopathic model. When you're having a heart attack or you've broken a bone, yes, absolutely, antibiotics might be necessary and these other conventional measures. But I completely agree with you. Let's stop trying to outsmart Mother Nature, and let's instead embrace that we are Mother Nature.
Right.
We are a beautiful part of this whole symbiotic organism that is our collective world and universe. And to try to fight against that constantly, it's a never ending task, and we won't win.
No, I mean you're spot on, and I think it's important to note that like you just said, I'm not against Western medicine. A lot of people have heard me say that many times. It has saved countless lives, and especially antibiotics. I mean, the introduction of antibiotics was a huge turning point in human history, especially in wars. People are losing limbs or having all these gashes on them. Yeah, antibiotics you don't want if you're on a battleground, you don't have access to really get proper medical care. Yeah, you probably want some antibiotics so you don't just have an open wound in a hostile territory where anything could get in there. So those antibiotics have saved countless lives. But I always go back to the story of I remember this is probably 5, 6 years ago. I remember my sister went into the doctor. She had her ear was bothering her, or something was bothering her. And I told my mom and her when they were going, I was like, look, they're probably going to offer you antibiotics before the test results come back. And they're going to just say, oh, just take this just in case. Sure enough, they go in there, they say, oh, we'll do the test. It'll be back in 48 hours. We're here, start these antibiotics. Sure enough, the test comes back, 48 hours later, it's not a bacterial infection. So then it says, oh, well, you got to finish the dose because you started it. And to me, that's just a load of bull crap. But regardless, it's people are often prescribing solutions before they even have the diagnosis of what it actually is. And antibiotics, again, are a great medicine, but I look at them as more of a last resort medicine. They're not the front line. It's not the first thing you say, hey, I'm not sure what this is. Let's throw some antibiotics at it just to see what happens. That to me is just, I mean, that's just poor medical practice.
Yes.
To be completely honest, I think it's very poor medical practice. But a lot of these things, if we use all these tools in the proper scenarios, we can be superhumans. We can have all these incredible solutions, but it's the balancing of everything and not just throwing Western medicine at everything, but also not throwing out the window either, because we want to
Yeah.
have it for the time and the place we need it.
Oh, exactly. And the thing exactly to what you said of just throwing, antibiotics as as this first knee jerk reaction almost, right? And I have a lot of people in my family. I mean, not to dog down on anybody, but it's just because a lot of people don't know any better. And unfortunately, a lot of people go to their doctor, they trust them, they feel like they're going to get the answers that they need. And so if someone that essentially you think knows more than you and knows better than you is prescribing it, well, then you're going to listen to them. And I have so many people in my family that the second they get a little cough or something, it's like, and it's like, oh, get a Z-Pack, or here's some, amoxicillin or whatever other antibiotic, that they're going to be prescribed. And I love what you said, where it's so much better served as a last resort option, especially because um, all of this overuse of the antibiotics is exactly what has just caused all these antibiotic resistant strains. It's these
Right.
super bugs, right? And it's those that are extremely dangerous, and it is scary, especially if someone is immunocompromised and in an unforgiving state and in a hospital, and they are exposed to these pathogenic bacteria that are completely unaffected by these antibiotics. And the only way that we can dial back from that and reduce this spread, and what I love to always say about life wants to live.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
even the weeds that are, you'll see weeds growing up through the cracks of cement. It's because life wants to live. If you even think about cancer, a cancer cell grows and continues to grow so rapidly because it's disconnected from the whole being, and it wants to grow and it wants to live. And so if we just take that very basic, human and just biology example of that all living things want to keep living, then an antibiotic or a bacteria is going to continue to evolve because it wants to keep living. So it's going to keep coming up with this reiterations of itself so that it can survive. And not to go too much down that wormhole, but it's the same with viruses. It's the same with anything that is looking to procreate and spread around the earth.
Absolutely. And I think it's also the other side that, it paints the picture that the human body is feeble and weak and just unable to combat any stressor, when in fact, our ability to respond to stress is inherently the reason why our species has gotten this far. The fact that we are so resilient and able to adapt and overcome stressors is why we have the ability to live where we are right now. Our fight or flight, our sympathetic nervous system. And I think it's really important to recognize that. And I'm not giving anybody medical advice here. This is always something, consult with your medical professional. But for me personally, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I remember I had a pretty bad ear infection. I remember going there and asking the doctor. He was, of course, his first thing was, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get you probiotics." I was like, "So what if I don't want to do, or not probiotics? I wish he said probiotics, antibiotics." He say, and I remember asking him, like, "So what would happen if I don't take antibiotics?" He was like, "Well, you'd probably be in pain for an extra, 2 or 3 days, but then it'd probably, go away on its own." So in my head, it was like, well, why didn't you tell me that first of all? Like, why wouldn't you say there's two options, saying there's only one option, you take antibiotics? Because had I not known better, I would have thought, oh, this is the only solution. But our body is able to fight off a lot of these invaders. And so again, this is not saying this is what anybody listening should do. This is my personal choice. And a couple days later, I was better. And
Mm.
maybe there's some lingering effect. I don't know, but I think I feel pretty good. And I think that I've combated pretty well. I took care of myself, got plenty of vitamin C, took probiotics, did anti-inflammatory foods, like did the whole thing and felt pretty good pretty quickly. And I think it's important to recognize, like, hey, our bodies are a lot stronger than we've been conditioned to believe. So if we're taking care of ourselves, there's a lot that we can overcome. And this is, I know that we're getting very deep down this rabbit hole right now. So I want to pull us
Love
out
it.
of the rabbit hole real quick, because I want to get back to the topic at hand. Somehow we got onto antibiotics. Maybe it's from the hand soap. That's where we started from. So kind of coming out of the hole, back to the home, and where we're talking about what are some of the ways. I know we talked about cookware, but food storage is a big one as well, just to completely shift gears back to where we were. Now, food storage, plastics are not great for most things. Tin foil, I'm not a big fan of for storage. How do you recommend people store their food? Also, again, tin foil is very convenient for cooking as well. Do you have any alternatives for tin foil cooking, anything like that? How can you recommend people store their food?
Yeah, great question. Well, and just total sidebar, absolutely love going down the wormhole with you.
Me too, but we could do that for probably 2 more hours. So we gotta stay on a little
Yeah,
bit of track here.
totally, totally. So, in regards to food storage, I mean, there's a few basic principles that I really love to just share with people, because most people have plastic food storage containers. I mean, we are our age group, and not our age group, but our parents' age group likely was, I like to call, the Tupperware generation. That was when the Tupperware parties, and then the generation before that as well, is kind of when that started. And it was this great, overtaking of a better life through engineering and through chemistry was the motto of, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that's when all of these chemicals, especially the things that make plastic, became so ubiquitous in our society. So the problem with plastic is that there are more chemicals in it, of course, and in particular, BPA is being one of them. And a lot of these chemicals that give it their malleable shape. So when they're heated, that is when they become more dangerous. I'm sure most of your listeners have heard, don't drink a plastic bottle of water if it's been heated, because the idea is that these chemicals, when heated, is that they now have the opportunity to leach into whatever it is that they are containing. So whether it be water in a plastic water bottle or the food that you've made at home. Now, what I always see that literally it makes me cringe, and like my soul just dies inside a little bit. I get really sad when I see people take their prepped food that they've taken the effort and the love and intention and time to make food at home, and they bring it into work and they pop it in the microwave in their plastic container.
Oh,
Oh
the worst.
man.
Absolutely the worst.
It just really crushes my soul. It makes me really sad because, that is just, it's such an opportunistic moment for these chemicals to leach into your food. So the biggest piece of advice I can say, just one, is to just get really mindful about the temperature of your food if you are storing it in plastic containers. Because full disclosure, like, I am not perfect. I don't have millions of dollars to spend on all of my favorite, glass things. And not that it even costs that, but I have plastic Tupperware as well. I typically use it to store, chopped onions or a half of an avocado in the fridge, things like that. Right. But I'm only using it for things that, one, are cool. And so I'm also never going to heat it. So if you are going to store your food in a plastic container, make sure that it is fully cooled before you're going to store it in the container. And then when you go to reheat it, always, 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 I mean, do it on the stovetop. I'm not a fan of microwaves either, but if that's what you got to do, I get it. I've been there. You're at work. You want your food to be warm. Microwave is your only option. Put it in glass, or better yet, just slowly switch over to glass containers. That is really your best option. They're not that expensive.
They're not.
And a great little hack that I love to share with people as well is, if you're buying pickles or pasta sauces or these different things that are already coming in a glass jar, just wash and reuse it. I mean, most of my glass containers that I store homemade bone broth and things of that nature, they're all just glass containers that I got as like a buy one, get one free gift. It seems like you've already bought it and spent the money, and now you get to reuse the glass container.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny as you're talking about the microwave, one of my friends, he every 3 months or so, he says he goes into his dad's house and takes his microwave and legitimately throws it in the dumpster. So I was visualizing that as you're saying that, because that's, again, a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down about how not great for us. And, some people would argue otherwise, but, from what I have researched and just on my own intuition of the taste and texture and a lot of these other things, it doesn't seem like it's the best. So One thing I do want to shift into, because I know we just discussed a lot of challenges that we find in the homes, but what are some solutions? What are some easy places to start that people can take steps to actively change the level of toxicity in their home, find some cleaner options, and just ultimately be focused on the solution rather than the problem?
Excellent question. Yeah. So a great place to start. Well, one, with the cookware, starting slow. So starting with one thing at a time. And also, just want to touch on you asked for an alternative option for aluminum foil. And my personal favorite is unbleached parchment paper. That's my go-to. There are plenty of brands out there around the same exact price as your typical Reynolds foil wrap, where you can just use parchment paper. Obviously, that doesn't work if you're going to have something over an open flame. But for most of your cooking needs in the kitchen, parchment paper is going to be just fine. You can actually heat parchment paper up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. I've done it multiple times. It's perfectly safe in your oven. So that's another great swap instead of using aluminum foil, because again, we know that aluminum foil is something that we're already getting, not aluminum foil, aluminum in general, particularly when it comes to deodorant and things of that nature. It's not great for our bodies. But to your point of just what are some great places to start, one of my favorite resources is Environmental Working Group. So your listeners, you can go, it's environmentalworkinggroup.org. That is where you can find just a plethora of information. It can be a bit overwhelming. So if you want to start in a place that is a little bit more bite-sized, I would say starting with just the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. I'm a massive, massive believer in just doing what you can. I know you are as well, and we're super aligned in that. And when the pushback of well, organic produce is a lot more money. It is more expensive. So if you're unable to shop local with your local farmers and buying everything organic is not feasible in your budget, then just sticking to the Dirty Dozen and buying those organic is an amazing place to start. So you can find that resource on the Environmental Working Group. Essentially, what it is for listeners that maybe don't know is every year they break down the 12 quote unquote dirtiest produce. And all that means is that's the produce that has the most chemicals and herbicides and pesticides sprayed on it, right? And then the clean produce are the produce that either have the least amount or they tend to have a very good outer protective natural layer anyway. So these are things like your bananas, your avocados, your oranges, things of that nature. So that's a great place to start. And then further on the Environmental Working Group site, they have a few free resources you can download that kind of give you an overview of some chemicals to avoid. I really love the app. It's called Think Dirty. It's by the EWG. It's a free app any of your listeners can download. And this is when it is in regards to personal care. So if you're feeling confused about, say, your face wash, and you just want to know, can download this app, you scan the barcode, and it'll instantly give you what their rating is. And I tend to always pick for things that are EWG approved. They'll have the seal of approval typically on the label, or just an A minus, or a B plus rating. That is kind of my threshold for me personally. But the app makes it really easy for users to just instantly find out something. And that's just also a really great way for anyone who's interested to learn more, because then you'll see what the common offenders are. If you are doing this, and you'll start to understand, I'm seeing PEG in a lot of things. What's that? What is this ethanol? What is what is this different? What is fragrance? What does this mean? And so using the resources that are available that are mostly free is a really great place to start. And then my favorite solution, which I know I have a feeling that you're going to agree with, is just simple is best. You don't need to have, I think, the consumerism, and I'm not anti-capitalist or anything by any means, but just this mass consumer society that we live in, we're being marketed for toilet bowl cleaner, toilet bowl rim cleaner, window cleaner, the sink cleaner, the floor cleaner, the shower door wall cleaner. We don't need 12 cleaners for one space in the home. So really just not wasting your money on a lot of those things. They're frivolous. You're not doing heart surgery on your bathroom counters. If you are, wow. But it's just not necessary. It's overkill. And to just, circle back to what we were talking about with the bacteria, it's better to live and let live a little bit. And my favorite solutions are vinegar, baking soda, essential oils, lemon. Those things can really do so much power. But if you're feeling like you don't want to go that far just yet, there are incredible companies out there now that are making better for you and better for the earth products. Some of my favorite brands are Dr. Bronner's. Attitude is a really great brand. That one's actually Environmental Working Group approved. There's Miss Myers. There's a lot of brands. Seventh Generation. Some of these aren't as quote unquote clean as they want to think. There is some level of greenwashing in some of these brands, so it's not a slam dunk, so to speak, but it's definitely better than using 409 on everything, especially when it comes to the fragrance, which is something I think we can touch on further. But that is also one of the biggest reasons that I refuse to have any of those products in my home personally.
Yeah, very well said. And I think it is important to know, like you had mentioned, that it doesn't need to be everything, and we also don't need everything. So if you have 15 different cleaners, yeah, you probably can throw some out because realistically, I use a couple at most, and a lot of them, sometimes apple cider vinegar, sometimes it is lemon, like you said. And sometimes all you need is a little soap and water. Sometimes you really don't need a whole heck of a lot more than that. So it just comes back to keeping it simple. And as you mentioned, these companies are doing a great job of marketing. That's their job, is to sell product. Their job is to push the item, make as much money as possible. They have every right to do that. Totally cool. But if we're aware of that, saying, hey, I just don't need that. It's not something I need. And then on the other end of the spectrum is being very careful of the companies that are posing as very healthy alternatives. And you took the words out of my mouth, greenwashing. So it's also a very easy trap to fall into. They have this fancy marketing, just like the other companies, very fancy, very influential marketing, but it all comes down to being a label reader. And that's what I think when it comes to food. You're saying looking for strange ingredients and maybe you can't pronounce, maybe you're unsure of what it is. Same thing with cleaning chemicals. Look for the things that stand out. For me, I look for fragrance is a big one when I look at, I'm looking at cleaners, I'm looking at shampoos or soaps or anything like that. Is if I see the word fragrance, unless it specifies that it's like an essential oil fragrance, which if it specifies, it's a much better step than just having this blanket statement of fragrance, could be 100 or 1,000 different things. So being aware of, once we start to learn to read labels, and I look for things like canola oil. If there's canola oil in my food, I try to avoid it. Same thing with things like sunflower oil. If there's a lot of sugar in there, do my best to avoid it. Again, this is not always perfect. Sometimes there's something I see, maybe the last ingredient is organic canola oil. I may take a break every so often and give it a try. And that's totally okay too. The objective here isn't to be perfect. It's just to do the best we can with what we've got. So, well,
Yeah.
we've covered a lot of bases here. And I know that we could go on for quite a bit longer. It's crazy. We've almost been chatting for almost an hour here, but I'd love to, just give you the opportunity to share a little bit of how people can get in contact with you, follow along with your work, and stay tuned with you for all the latest.
Thank you so much, Rob. Yeah, this conversation has been really fun, and it's important. And I couldn't agree more with what you just said, and the sentiment of it's not about being perfect. It's just about awareness and education. And once you know better, as the saying goes, you can do better. And I think it's a great opportunity to just take advantage of that 80/20 rule. do as best you can 80% of the time. And then that other 20% is going to be your birthday parties at someone's house where you don't have control of what was made. It's the dinners out with friends, right? Your life is meant to be lived. But if you do your best at home 80% of the time, you will reap those benefits and also build that resiliency, like we talked about earlier, where your body will be better equipped to handle this influx of, inflammatory oils like canola oil and these sugars and all of these other chemicals that we're just being inundated with. So just wanted to say that to wrap it up. And I feel so grateful and honored to connect with you today. And if any of your listeners have enjoyed this conversation, you can find me over on Instagram, mainly is the place where I hang out. I'm at the Clean Bee, and that's THEE Clean Bee. Also have a podcast as well, as Rob mentioned. It's the Clean Bee podcast, which again, Rob's episode is going to be dropping on October 23rd. Also, if you would like, and this conversation has kind of sparked your interest to dive a little bit deeper and maybe take control of some of this at your home, I do have a free resource that your listeners can download. It's a grocery shopping and recipes guide that gives you a real tangible 10-page PDF of the clean 15, the dirty dozen, things to look out for, what to avoid, as well as some meal prep tips and some recipes that can help get you started on your journey. So I can share that link with you if you want to share with your listeners. And then you'll be signed up for the weekly newsletter as well. And just look forward to connecting with your audience. And if anyone ever has questions, I love chatting in the DMs about this, super passionate about it. And I would love to help and serve in any way that I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Madalyn. And yeah, so everybody listen, I will put those links in the description box as well. A lot of great resources on Madalyn's page. She does a great job with her Instagram profile. So definitely check that out. And, definitely, if you enjoy this episode, share it. That's how we spread the message. If you took something away with it, share this with somebody that could benefit. Leave a comment, let us know what you like best. And that way we can know, hey, there's definitely going to be another episode between us at some point, whether it's on her podcast or my podcast or both again. So, if there's a topic that you feel like you'd like to hear more of, let us know in the comments or send us a message so we know, hey, next time we get together, we can dive deeper on that. Because the feedback is what really allows us to serve at the greatest potential that we can. So we're totally open to receiving what you want to hear more of, and that way we can serve you. So yeah, this podcast is going out today when you're listening to it. If you're listening to this after the 23rd, Madalyn's podcast with myself is already out. If you're listening to this on the day it drops, it'll probably be coming out in a few days. So check that out on her podcast on the Clean Bee. I will put those links in the description box as well. If you have not already checked out my new and improved website with my free ebooks, I highly encourage you to do that. I have some free resources on there as well. My favorite is Yes, You Can Grow Your Own Food. That's a 13-page ebook. I would love for all you beautiful people listening to check that out, download that for free, and check out some of the other stuff we got going on so we can keep growing healthier and happier together. So, Madalyn, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so very much. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And everybody listening, thanks for tuning in. Have the best day ever, and we'll see you soon.